Hey there, it's Olivia's Spanner here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads of 10 books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. I've got content warnings in the description box down below, and without further ado, let's get right down to these books because I've got a lot of good books to recommend you this time around. So we're going to be starting on a high and just keep going on that high. So I finally read Bitter by Akwaeke and Emezi, which I have been meaning to read since it came out. How embarrassing. And I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it as expected because it's by Akwaeke and Emezi, who I'm a big fan of. So this is the prequel to Pet, and I highly recommend reading Pet before reading this one. And this one is set in the same town. However, we're going back in time to follow Pet's mother, who is called Bitter. And Bitter is a child who has been deserted by a lot of people. She's been through the foster care system and it's not been kind to her, and so she's living in this kind of school that's for people who are artists and creatives. And in the town there are monsters that exist, and these monsters are very much a metaphor for the billionaires, for the racists, for the police, and there are people who are protesting against them. But Bitter has nothing to do with those people. She doesn't want anything to do with them. She just wants to find safety. But when her friends and the people that she loves are threatened by this monstery force, she ends up doing something about it. This book is just so wonderfully complex, even though it's a young adult novel. One thing I'll say about it being a young adult novel is that it's definitely on the mature end of the young adult scale. There's swearing in it, there's drinking, there's smoking. But it's such an important book and it's such a good one. We are looking at that metaphor of who is bad and also how you can fight that revolution against the people who are oppressing you, the people who are really stopping you from reaching your full potential. And you can see that this is clearly talking about race, this is clearly talking about money, this is clearly talking about all the other ways in which people are oppressed and for whatever reason. And so I quite like that it shows the messiness of what a revolution looks like. There's not a good side where everybody agrees and everybody's all opposing, they all know how they want to fight against these people. No, there is fractured opinions of what should and shouldn't be happening, and it shows how anger and hurt can create monsters of us all, whether we are fighting for the right thing or whether we are fighting for the wrong thing, and how important intention is, and that you can make mistakes. All of that is very neatly wrapped up into this book, and those are some big heavy themes to carry, but at the same time we get to see such a range of diverse characters. Our main character is black, of course, but there are other black characters. There's a wheelchair user main character, there's queer characters. Our main character is queer, but there's plenty of other queer characters as well. And that representation is kind of smoothly woven into the story and feels very natural. We've also got a really beautiful romance happening on the side, and I do think that romance just looked so lovely to me and so realistic, because not only do you understand where it's going to go if you've read Pet before, but it also shows how important healthy communication is, how important, adoration is, but also how important like putting into action the promises you make your partner is. And I think it felt like a very mature romance to have in this book, not in terms of what they get up to, but in terms of how this romance blossoms. And I really liked it. I just really loved getting to see that. I shipped them a lot. That's really not the full focus of this book. It's just a little side tidbit that I really appreciated. There's also a lot in here about being brave, and there's a lot in here about healing and friendship and forgiveness. There's literally so many themes. There's also some spiritualism in here, as Akwaeke and Emezi is known for. Everything that I could possibly have wanted this book to give me, it gave me and more, and so I absolutely love it and can't wait to just keep on reading my Akwaeke and Emezi books. I read another truly stellar book, and that is Ring Shout by Djèlí. This is another one that I've been meaning to read for such a long time, and I watched Sinners, and that same week I read this book and I gave it 5 stars and I absolutely loved it. So this is a novella that I would describe as a fantasy novella with some horror elements, and it's set in a world where the KKK exist, but the KKK actually manifest as these monsters, these actual fantasy monsters, and you follow our main character who has a group of friends, and they are the ones who have this sight so they can see those monsters and they fight against them. That is basically what this book is, but there's also a lot more to it, as well as this big racism theme that it's tackling and discussing. There's a lot of black culture in here. There's a Gullah woman, there's the shouts, which are kind of like the singing in Sinners in some ways, if you want to make those comparisons, and there's a big element of, again, spiritualism and mythology and how that ties into this particular story. I really loved how it drew on a lot of black culture, on a lot of black myth, especially African American myth and culture, and wove it into the story. And the story does move very fast because this is a novella and it's got a lot to do in the short number of pages that it has. But I was ceaselessly impressed by how smoothly and how quickly it managed to construct that world building so that I felt grounded and understood the world and what they were fighting against, and then it could move straight on smoothly to building some characterization, which again it did wonderfully. I got such a good taste of the found family that these women formed as they fought against these creatures, and then seamlessly moved us into the plot next. And the plot had like a big plot behind it with a lot of a big thematic meaning, so I appreciate that it gave the majority of the time to that. The plot kind of lulled me into a false sense of security and then managed to go in unexpected directions, which I really appreciated reading because I thought I had everything figured out and I did not. And I also really liked the theme and ultimate message that this touches on. I don't want to get into it too much. Obviously there is a message that racism is bad, but there is more to it than that, and I really liked how this book tackled it and unpicked it and showed us how to be empowered. The sense of empowerment while I was reading this novella was very strong, and when I read the author's note I just wanted to snap my fingers and applaud because I loved what he had to say in the author's note. This is not the first Djèlí Clark book that I've read, and it definitely will not be my last because he knows what he's doing. I read a graphic novel and I read Demon in the Wood by Leigh Bardugo, and this is illustrated by Dani Pendergast. This is the story of the Darkling when he is younger, so it's set in the same Grisha world that we know from Six of Crows and we know from Shadow and Bone. It took me right back, and it was all his story about how he came to be, kind of who he is by the time we meet him in Shadow and Bone. I gave this 5 stars, absolutely loved it. It became a new favourite. Honestly, we're just here for my favourites today. And I have to say, I really loved this. It's been a long time since I read Shadow and Bone. I actually went back on my channel recently and watched some old videos. So I know it's been exactly 10 years since I've read Shadow and Bone for the first time. And when I did, my teenage mind was blown. I absolutely loved the Darkling, and I do consider him one of my favourite villains. I would love to burn down the world with him. And getting to go back into the Grisha world just felt so familiar. It felt like coming home. I was like, oh my gosh, this world. But if it's been a long time, this graphic novel does set you back up into the world building quite quickly and quite smoothly. Gives you a little bit of a recap, and then we get right into the story. And I feel like it's more than a villain origin story because it shows you how the way that you view the Darkling is either a hero story or a villain story, depending on how you look at it. And I think what this graphic novel did so well was it made me empathize, not only with our young little Darkling here, but also with the Darkling's mum, also with the people that they encounter in this story. I emphasized and understood all of their points of view, even if they weren't always correct or right in what they were doing. And I think that takes very good characterization, and it's actually quite a slow story. If you think about the scope of the action that happens in this, there's not that much action. It's very much a character study with those relationships coming into it, those relationships kind of informing the concepts and ideas that this graphic novel is dealing with. But it does it very smoothly and it does it seamlessly, and I was very impressed by the time that I turned that last page. The artwork is pretty good. It serves the story in the way that it needs to, and you can see that it's quite like it goes through color palette moments. Like there's the browns, then you get to the oranges, then to the grays, blues, that kind of thing. So the artwork worked really well for the story. The world building was good, like extensive, because it's built on world building that's already established, and the characterization was fantastic. So by the time I turned the last page, I was like, what would I change about this? Is there any improvement that I would give? And I thought to myself, no, there really is nothing. 5 stars. Then I read Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. I've read many Tennessee Williams plays before, and I know that I really like his playwriting. So I was looking forward to reading this one. I finally did, and I thought it was good, but not my favourite Tennessee Williams play. So this one follows Margaret, who is married to this man, and he's kind of no good. He's an alcoholic. He just wants to drink his drink and be left alone. And it's also centered around this big family monarch, the Big Daddy as they call him, and he is dying. But they haven't really told Big Daddy that he's dying, and at the same time all the family members have gathered together and they're all hungering after the inheritance. They want that money, but he doesn't actually know that he is dying in this play. So that's what the play is about, and you get to see it's just quite a bleak play. I really love me some existentialism, some nihilism, some bleakness in my plays. That's typically the kind of play that I like, and this does the bleakness expertly well. The characters are so static. They're so firm in their ways, they're not going to change. There are so many moments in the play where maybe they can change, maybe they can grasp some sense of goodness, maybe they can understand each other, and they keep missing those cues, and it's so painful to see unravel that all of these people are so driven by greed and selfishness. There are no likable characters in this. I cannot think of a single one, and you can kind of emphasize with some of them, and you can understand how they've become the way that they are, but that still does not deny the fact that every single person in this play is a terrible person. And I liked that. I liked that there was a sense of unforgiving. There was a sense of there's no give. You're stuck. And that staticness was really translated well in this play. That said, this play is quite long. I've read some of Tennessee Williams' other plays, and they're not usually as long as this. Now, I say this as someone who has read the play script. If you see the play on stage, I bet you wouldn't feel its length, but for me it felt a bit monotonous sometimes. It felt a bit repetitive, and like we weren't getting anywhere. And I think that was also part of the point of the story, that it was repetitive, that it was keeping the same kind of tone the whole way through. But as someone who was reading every single word and page, it did feel a bit long. And there are some aspects to this play that just have not aged well. There's a lot of fatphobia in this play, and a lot of the fatphobia might not be something that you would recognize on a stage adaptation because of the fact that it's written into the directions of the play. A lot of the stage directions use bodily descriptions that are fatphobic, and so I feel like this could actually be better seen on stage because you wouldn't get any of those stage directions. Tennessee Williams is very direct in his stage directions. He puts it all in there, so I think that would kind of age it better. But also there's a bit of like moments about racism I'm just like, oh, it's not really the best, so it hasn't aged well. And the last thing I'll say is that my edition included an alternate ending to the play, and this didn't affect my rating or opinion, but I read that alternate ending and I read why Tennessee Williams included that alternate ending, and I completely disagree with the alternate ending. I think Tennessee Williams shouldn't have given for anybody. He shouldn't have written another alternative ending because his ending is the only one that makes sense for this play. So that's what I'll say on that. Then we have Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is also another one that I've been meaning to read for a long time, and I finally did, and I gave it 5 stars, and I absolutely loved it. And this was a brilliant sci-fi book. So this one is kind of following a trajectory we see a lot in sci-fi, where the planet Earth is kind of unlivable, and so these humans have decided to embark on a journey out in space to find another livable planet. As well as that, some humans have decided to toy with evolution and to see if they can evolve a species in a way that could benefit the human race and their future and their survival. So those two things are happening at the same time, and what this kind of results in is, as this book is known for, alien spiders. I have severe arachnophobia, and yet I read a book about alien spiders and I loved it, and nobody is more surprised than me. What I really like about this book is that it is just so intelligent. It is so smart in the way that it looks at evolution, but also the way that it looks at humanity and the choices that humans will make. I've seen some reviews saying that this is quite a Western perspective on evolution, and I agree, I think it is, but I don't think that makes it any less smart or any less intelligent. And the fact that Adrian Tchaikovsky can make me sympathize with alien spiders is just something else. The fact that I ended up caring about the Fabians, I ended up caring about the Porsches, I ended up caring about like all of the characters. There's not a single character that I didn't end up caring about while I was reading this, and that kind of shocked me. Holston, Lane, Porsches and Fabians were my favourite characters for those who have read the book, but I was impressed by how this was a really world building and plot heavy book, and yet I could still care about the characters and I could still care about the choices that they made. I think having two points of view of the alien spiders and then points of view of the humans, and how they like switched off per chapter, was very, very smart and intelligent, because it made you care about both sides and both storylines, which do intertwine even though it might take a while to do that. To me, all of the science clocked. I'm not a scientist, I can't fact check anything, but all of the science just kind of made sense and was explained in a way where I could understand what was happening at any point, and it felt like there was science interjected into my sci-fi, which I really, really like, but also that it was described in a level and a way that I could understand and could agree with and could see how everything tied up together and made sense. And ultimately, even though this was a big book, I read it so quickly because the book has pace, the book has suspense, the book had me very, very nervous for the outcome and the ending of what this book would amount to, and I just kept thinking, I don't see how this is going to end well for everybody, and it stressed me out. I was stressed. I was so stressed reading the end of the book, and that's exactly where I want to be in a book that has such good world building and such good plotting. So I really, really enjoyed this. I was very impressed, and I cannot wait to read the sequel. So we are halfway through the books, which is a good time for me to tell you that if you head over to my Patreon, you will be able to sign up to any tier, and any tier will get access to my review of Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent, which I have also recently read. And a massive thank you to my patrons. Every single one of you make my absolute day. I didn't realize I had another 5-star. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. So then we have Turtle Moon by Hannah Gold. This is the last published Hannah Gold book I have to read. I've read every single one of Hannah Gold's books, and this is my absolute favorite. I gave it 10 out of 10, 5 stars. Once again, I really, really enjoyed reading Turtle Moon. So if you know me and you've been on this channel for a while, I've talked about how all these cat books are not necessarily my favorite thing, and I'm not that interested in animals in books. And this is because the animals that I tend to like are not the ones that get books about them. I really like crabs, I really like worms, I really like snails, I really like shelled creatures. Turtles I absolutely love, and so I really enjoyed reading this environmental conservatism book about how turtles are endangered species, and this young child who ends up going to a turtle conservatory with her parents for a particular reason of the dad needing to do some painting, and kind of falls in love with turtles, especially leatherback turtles, and wants to do her best to help these turtles have their eggs safely so that they can be less of an endangered species. I really loved all the facts that we got about turtles. I think any child reader, because this is middle grade, is going to love some of the cool facts that you learn about turtles. Did you know that during hibernation, turtles pretty much breathe from their butt? I didn't know that. I had a great time learning that. So I just ate up all the facts in here. All the children will eat up all the facts in here. But as well as this, I think this is one of the few Hannah Gold books where you can really clearly see that the parents are having a storyline in the background. And that storyline is that the mum and the dad have recently tried to have a second child, and they've miscarried, and it's been such a long process of IVF and other things that they really just need to understand they're not going to be able to have any other children. Silver is a young child, but she understands that she wasn't enough for them, that her parents wanted to have more, and that they're not able to have more, and she feels like she's lackluster, but the parents don't quite understand that. And that contradiction between her parents and her, you can see how that manifests in their relationship and their day-to-day, in the way that the mum is treating Silver because of her depression, and you sympathize and understand what the parents are going through, but you really understand how it's affecting Silver as well. And I think this storyline was handled exceptionally well for something that's not the main storyline that children will pick up on, I don't think. And reading the author's note as well, and Hannah Gold talking about her own journey with infertility, was really emotional, and I think that serious tone to the book, alongside a really fun story about turtles and turtle facts and trying to go against poachers who are trying to steal the turtle eggs, it all just kind of seamlessly made a brilliant, brilliant story that I really, really enjoyed. This is also illustrated by Levi Pinfold, and I think the illustrations are gorgeous. There's not as many as I've seen in some of the other Hannah Gold books, but for each and every single one we got, I was incredibly grateful. I think this is a fantastic middle grade book. I was really in the mood for plays, so then I read The Price by Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller is another playwright who I'm a big fan of, and I've read several of his plays, and The Price is about these two brothers, and there's this house that's their inheritance, and one brother has decided he's going to sell it. He's tried to get in touch with the other brother multiple times, and then as he is just about to cinch the deal to get the money, the other brother walks in. And this is a play that is largely dialogue heavy. They're all in one room, the two brothers, the person who's going to be buying the furniture, and one of the brother's wives. And they're all there, and they're trying to determine the price of the furniture that it should be sold at. And this is a huge metaphor. It's a big metaphor all the way through, and I thought it was very, very clever. I loved the way that the metaphor built on itself, because yes, they are determining the price for the furniture, but they're also determining the price of their inheritance and what they think they should deserve, how they should split it up. But they're also talking about the price they pay for the choices that they've made in their lives, as you quickly realize these two brothers have been given very different information as they grew up, and the two brothers both decided to go very opposing paths in life, even though their trajectory was very close together at the start. And you can see what it's cost one of them and what it's cost the other, and whether their price was worth what they've paid for it. As well as the wife who's kind of in this and has a price that she's paying for choosing to be with this particular brother. So you can see that everything is a big metaphor for the choices that we make in life, and I think that metaphor was done exceptionally well with every single unraveling of the play. And it's one of those plays where there's not a big groundbreaking moment, but the whole time I was just so unsure of who to trust, because there's a lot of he said, she said in this. There's a lot of, do I trust what this character is saying about the past that they've lived? Do I believe that's what the past really was? Do I believe that they only had this information? And so even though it's a very dialogue heavy play and very character driven, I was still on the edge of my seat because I could not tell who was telling the truth, and I was trying to determine what did people deserve based on the price that they pay, and that was a very big question. So I have to give it to Arthur Miller, because in this play, again, he managed to make something that was incredibly thought-provoking, where there were not many props, there were not many actions happening in the play, but the speech really led the whole thing. I read A Treachery of Swans by A.B. Poranek. This is a young adult fantasy book that is a retelling of Swan Lake. I love a good ballet. Swan Lake is my favourite ballet. When I was younger, I loved the Barbie films. Swan Lake was my favourite Barbie film. So I was very excited to read a young adult retelling of Swan Lake, as it's one of the stories that we don't get to see that often. And so in this one, you follow the Black Swan, who is the daughter of a magician, and she is trying to bring magic back to the society, to this world, because Morgana had taken the magic away and stripped it from the world that they're in when she gets trapped into a crown. And then we've also got Odile, who is our white swan, and our white swan is part of the elite, and she is about to marry the prince. So of course a spell cast on the princess to make her into a swan so that the black swan can pretend to be her and take her place and get closer to the crown that she needs to have, is where the plot is going. And I read this and I really enjoyed it, and I had such a fun and good time. I still don't think it's the best young adult fantasy, but I think it's because of the fact that I love the ballet so much, and that I love the story and the myth of Swan Lake so much, that I just had a good time regardless, because I really enjoyed what the story did with it. I really enjoyed that it made it sapphic, so we've got a female-female relationship at the core of this, and I liked how it switched kind of what pairings you get in Swan Lake to make this really gay, which is so much fun. And the plot is also uproariously fun. There's so much drama, there's so many plot twists, there's a mystery at the core of everything that they've got to solve. There's a lot about manipulation and good versus bad, and how this magic is going to be returning to the world. There's so much in the plot, which is so much fun to read about. I just wasn't thinking this is the next best thing ever, and I don't think it's going to be a memorable one for me, but I had such a good time in the process of reading it. I think the world building is solid, I think the magic system is very solid and very well explained, I think the characterization is pretty good, and I just really liked that I never could predict the plot, and even though I knew the original story that we were getting a retelling of, I was still pleasantly surprised by the events that went down. So I don't actually have too much to say on this. I do also want to add though that I felt like the ending left it open for there to be a sequel, and I was a bit disappointed because I picked this up on the basis of it being a standalone, but then the epilogue kind of wrapped everything up very quickly, and so it's definitely a standalone. But I feel like we needed the ending before the epilogue to be more conclusive, so that I didn't feel like the epilogue was rushed add-on. But yeah, I had a good time with this. It was a nice time. I don't think it's a long time though. So because I really had such a good time reading my other plays, I decided to get to the next Arthur Miller that I had on my shelf, and that is Broken Glass. Now this is a play about a Jewish man who is really concerned about his wife because his wife suddenly loses the ability to walk, and he employs a doctor to help him with that. At the same time as the woman losing her ability to walk, she has been reading a lot about the uprising of the Nazis in Germany and what they've been doing to other Jewish people there. So I think that a fact I knew before but forgot and then relearned in the process of reading this play is that Arthur Miller is, or was I should say, Jewish, and so I'd forgotten that, and then after seeing that Jewish culture is a big feature of this play, I just looked it up again and I was like, oh, actually I think I knew this, and I remembered it. And so reading this play I felt quite mixed, because what I really like about Arthur Miller's plays typically is that his plays are a crescendo or they're a big metaphor, and this kind of lacked both. There was no big metaphor here, but there was also no like point. I didn't understand the point of this story. There's a lot of little things going on. We've got a Jewish man who seems to have a lot of internalized hate that he's unpicking. We've got a wife who's really struggling with what's happening in Germany as it's being overridden by the Nazis. And then you've also got this doctor who's trying to help, but I don't really understand what his motivations are or what he's actually doing in the play. So I was very confused. And I can see that there's a larger picture here about Jewish culture and Nazism and the historical moment that this is centered around, but it just didn't all kind of click and fall in place in the way that I wanted my play to at the end. So I felt very unsettled, especially also with how the disability is portrayed. Even though I do think there's nothing wrong with how it's portrayed, I was just like, how does this contribute? So the biggest thing that I took away from this is that there's nothing wrong with having compassion for the struggle that other people are going through, especially as you understand that that struggle can so quickly and so easily become yours as well. But other than that, which is not demonstrated that well, it's something that I took away from it myself, I'm a little bit lost at what Arthur Miller was trying to do with this play, and I just don't think it kind of pulled it off or worked for me. It was a very quick read. It's shorter than a lot of his other ones, so yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And then last but not least, we have here The Harrowing by Kristen, Kiesling and Hickman, and this is a graphic novel. And it's a graphic novel about these Harrows who can see the future, and they can see a murder and a crime before it is committed. So they get a vision that you're going to commit this crime, and then the Harrows have a system of what they do about it. However, when this young girl discovers that she is a Harrow and that they do something to these criminals, like how do you give justice or like hold these criminals before they commit their crime? Like, what are you charging them with? And once she kind of looks into that, she discovers that maybe there's something not so great about the Harrows as well. And after I put my review on Instagram, people said, oh, that's like that Spielberg film Minority Report, which I'd never heard of before, and then I looked it up and it is almost exactly the same kind of concept, which is fine, I think, because I did like this graphic novel. I just don't think it's the most groundbreaking thing out there. So what I liked about this is the concept. The concept is really, really cool, and I love the dilemma at its core of what do you do with these people that you know are going to commit a crime. Is it for you to judge them? Is it for you to persecute them? Should you be teaching them how to live a different way, and that kind of recalibrates them so that they won't commit the crime? Like, what do you do with these people? I loved that question. It's a very interesting concept and topic to delve into. While I found the artwork just alright, I really liked the colour palette in this, which is, as you can see, red and black, and the red and black actually has something to do with what it means to be a Harrow and the type of crime you're going to commit. So I really like that the colour palette kind of reflected the story itself, and I did like our main character, and I did like the love interest that we see in this. So I really was having a good time, especially in the first half, because it takes its time with the world building and the concept building and setting us up. However, I do think the second half of this is a lot weaker, and that's because it spent so long trying to get us into this world and get us into the concept that it didn't have any time to really pull off a plot effectively, and so it interjects the plot kind of at the last minute, and then that plot gets resolved all too quickly. I wish that this could have been a duology graphic novel, because then it could have set us up in the first book and had the beginnings of the plot in the first book and had time to kind of really develop it and finish it and continue it in a second and final book, which this unfortunately just did not have the room for. So everything felt very rushed and felt very quick and resolved way too quickly, and because it had to be resolved so quickly, instead of taking that big dilemma and kind of tackling it and looking into it, the plot kind of swerved around it and kind of avoided having to answer those big questions, and that was a bit disappointing to me because I thought that's what we were getting at, and it turned out that that was not what we were getting at. We were going to get at a very quick, easy plot. So I was a bit disappointed with the second half, but I did really like the first half of this. And there you have it. Those are 10 books that I've recently read. Please let me know in the comment section down below. Do you read plays? Do you read graphic novels? What was the last one you read? Or if you have any play that you've recently seen that you would recommend to me. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior! So this one follows, oh, what's her name? What's her name? Say my name, say my name. Yes.